In the autumn of 1918, a soldier woke up in a military camp outside Boston feeling fine. By noon, he was feverish. By evening, his lips had turned blue. Within 48 hours, he was dead. He was 23 years old. Across the Atlantic, in the waterlogged trenches of the Western Front, entire platoons collapsed before they could fire a single shot. Field hospitals overflowed. Doctors stood over patients they could not save, watching healthy young men drown in the fluid filling their own lungs. Across the world, in India, in South Africa, in the islands of the South Pacific, the same scene repeated itself with horrifying regularity. A question began forming in the minds of those who survived long enough to ask it. Was something older and darker than war itself moving through the world? What was unfolding in those months was the most lethal pandemic in modern human history. The influenza outbreak of 1918 and 1919 infected an estimated 500 million people, roughly 1/3 of every living human being on the planet at the time. It killed somewhere between 50 and 100 million of them. The numbers are so vast, they resist comprehension. The entire debt of the First World War, 4 years of industrialized slaughter, totaled approximately 17 million. The influenza killed that many and then kept going. It moved faster than any army, crossed every border, and cared nothing for rank, nationality, or medical credential. And unlike most influenza strains, it reserved its most savage punishment for the young and the strong. To understand how this happened, we must understand the world the virus entered. By 1918, the planet was more connected than it had ever been, and simultaneously more stressed. The Great War had been grinding for 4 years. Millions of men from across North America, Europe, Africa, and Asia had been pulled from their homes and compressed into the most densely packed military infrastructure the world had ever assembled. Training camps in the United States held tens of thousands of soldiers in wooden barracks built for far fewer. The trenches of France stretched for hundreds of miles, men sleeping in the mud shoulder to shoulder, sharing food, water, and air. This was not merely an army. It was an enormous, continuously moving biological pump, drawing men in from across the globe, mixing them together, and then shipping them outward again on troop transports. The virus itself most likely emerged in early 1918, though its precise origin remains a subject of genuine scientific debate. Some researchers point to military camps in Kansas, where a cluster of severe influenza cases was recorded as early as March 1918. Others suggest the virus circulated first in Europe, or possibly in China. What is certain is that the first wave, which rolled through the spring of that year, appeared relatively mild. Soldiers got sick. Most recovered. Military commanders took note but did not stop the movement of men. No one recognized what was gathering on the horizon. Then came the second wave. In August of 1918, something had changed in the virus. The pathogen that re-emerged that autumn was biologically different from its spring predecessor, and catastrophically more lethal. In 2008, researchers finally identified why. A cluster of 3 specific genes had given the virus the ability to break down a victim's bronchial tubes and clear the path for bacterial pneumonia to take hold. The pneumonia moved fast. In many cases, death followed within 2 days of the first symptoms, and those symptoms were unlike ordinary influenza. The infected experienced violent hemorrhaging. Blood poured from the nose, from the ears. The lack of oxygen turned the skin a distinctive dusky blue, a discoloration so unusual that some physicians initially doubted they were dealing with influenza at all. What made the 1918 pandemic uniquely terrifying was its victim profile. Influenza normally kills the very old and the very young, the immunologically vulnerable. This virus inverted that logic entirely. Its deadliest toll fell on adults between 20 and 40 years of age. The leading theory holds that the immune systems of younger adults, precisely because they were stronger, mounted an overwhelming inflammatory response to the unfamiliar pathogen, a cascade that flooded the lungs with fluid and killed its host in the process of trying to save it. The stronger you were, the faster you could die. This was the deepest horror of it. Youth offered no protection. Physical fitness offered no protection. The soldiers who had survived poison gas and artillery were felled in their barracks by something invisible and entirely outside their understanding. The wartime conditions did not merely fail to slow the virus, they actively accelerated it. Governments on both sides of the conflict understood that news of mass illness among their troops could devastate morale at home and embolden the enemy, and so they suppressed it. British, American, French, and German newspapers published almost nothing about the scale of the outbreak. Spain, a neutral nation with an uncensored press, reported freely on the epidemic's devastation within its own borders, including the illness of King Alfonso XIII. And so the world came to call it the Spanish flu, a name that blamed a country that had simply been willing to tell the truth. The actual origin remains uncertain. The misnomer stuck regardless. It was the ships and the railways that carried the virus everywhere else. Troop transports crossing the Atlantic in the autumn of 1918 became floating charnel houses. Men boarded healthy and arrived barely able to walk, or did not arrive at all. In one documented crossing, a single transport vessel lost more than 200 men before it reached port. From the docks, the disease moved inland along rail lines with ruthless efficiency, reaching cities that had never seen a battle. Philadelphia held a Liberty Loan parade in late September 1918, a massive public gathering intended to raise money for the war effort. Within 72 hours of that parade, every hospital bed in the city was full. Within 2 weeks, 11,000 Philadelphians were dead. The city ran out of coffins. Bodies were stacked in morgues that had no room left to store them. The medical establishment of 1918 was not equipped for what it was facing. Physicians understood that influenza was caused by a pathogen, but they did not yet know it was a virus. The tools to see or isolate such a thing did not exist. Most believed they were dealing with a bacterium, and they treated their patients accordingly and ineffectively. There were no antiviral medications. There were no ventilators in any modern sense. Nurses, already desperately short in number because so many were serving in military hospitals, worked until they collapsed. Doctors bled patients, prescribed whiskey, recommended camphor oil. None of it made any measurable difference. The realization that medicine had almost nothing to offer was its own form of catastrophe, a psychological rupture that mirrored what the plague doctors of the 14th century had experienced confronting the buboes they could not explain. The pandemic moved through the entire globe with astonishing speed. It reached India, where it killed at minimum 12.5 million people, possibly far more. It reached the Alaskan interior, wiping out entire Inuit villages in weeks, leaving communities with no survivors old enough to bury the dead. It reached Western Samoa, killing 22% of the entire population in a matter of months. New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, nowhere was spared. The social fabric tore in familiar ways. Schools closed, courts closed, churches held funerals they could barely staff. In some American cities, gauze masks were mandated in public spaces, and police were stationed at street corners to arrest anyone caught coughing without one. People stopped visiting neighbors. They stopped visiting family. The logic of survival demanded isolation, and isolation hollowed out the texture of ordinary life. By the summer of 1919, the third wave had largely subsided. The virus had burned through enough of the global population that herd immunity, accumulated slowly, at enormous human cost, finally began to blunt its advance. The world emerged from the pandemic into a strange, muted silence. The war had already ended in November 1918. The peace negotiations at Versailles took place while President Woodrow Wilson was severely ill, many historians believe with influenza. And some argue that his sudden cognitive decline during those negotiations may have shaped the terms of the treaty that followed, with consequences that reverberated for decades. The pandemic had reached into everything. It had touched the end of one war and possibly helped lay the groundwork for another. Entire generations of young adults had been thinned in ways that would not be fully understood for years afterward. In the United States alone, 675,000 people had died, more than all American combat deaths in every war of the 20th century combined.